The galaxy was old, and the galaxy was vast, and in all its endless spinning darkness, there were 4,000 species that called themselves civilized. They had faster-than-light travel. They had trade routes that stretched across spiral arms, and they had a government they called the Conclave of Aligned Species, a grand assembly where every voice was supposed to matter, though in truth, only the loud ones ever did. Humanity was not loud. In the year 2347, the species known as Homo sapiens had been traveling among the stars for just over 200 years. They held 14 small systems along the Orion Spur, a stretch of space that most galactic cartographers did not even bother to label on their maps. It was the edge of nowhere, the backwater of the Milky Way, and the rest of the galaxy was perfectly happy to forget that humans existed at all. They built their colonies. They farmed their worlds. They raised their children under alien suns, and they did not ask for much. They simply wanted to be left alone. But the galaxy does not leave anyone alone forever. Ambassador Lena Vasquez had served as Earth's representative to the Conclave for 11 years, and in all that time, she had never once raised her voice in the Great Hall. She was a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair and tired eyes that had seen too many polite smiles hiding contempt. She sat in the human delegation seat, which was located in the back of the chamber, near the ventilation ducts, and she listened to the same speeches she had heard 100 times before. The strong species talked about expansion, the weak species talked about survival, and nobody talked about humans at all. That changed on a cold Tuesday in the Terran calendar, when the Velthraki Dominion announced its new territorial mandate. The Velthraki were insects, or something close to it. They stood 7 feet tall on 4 armored legs, with 2 upper limbs that ended in blade-like claws. Their exoskeletons were the color of dried blood, and their compound eyes reflected light like shattered mirrors. They had ruled 800 star systems for longer than humanity had possessed written language, and they believed, with the absolute certainty that only ancient empires can possess, that the galaxy belonged to them. Shipmaster Zorath Velkane stood before the conclave and declared that the Dominion would be expanding its borders into the unclaimed sectors along the galactic rim. His voice was a low clicking sound that the translation systems rendered into sharp, clipped sentences. He spoke the way a predator speaks, not asking for permission, but simply announcing what was about to happen. The unclaimed sectors he was talking about sat right next to human space. Vasquez raised her hand to speak. She was ignored for 20 minutes before the speaker finally acknowledged her. When she stood, she could feel 4,000 alien eyes on her, most of them already bored. The sectors in question border 14 human colony worlds, she said, keeping her voice calm and steady. We would like assurances that Velthraki expansion will respect existing boundaries and civilian populations. Zorath turned one of his compound eyes toward her. The rest of his head did not move. The effect was deeply unsettling. We are aware of the human settlements, he said. They are not a concern. That was all he said. He turned away. The conclave moved on to the next topic. Her hands were steady, but something cold had settled in her chest. She had been a diplomat long enough to know what not a concern meant when spoken by a species with 800 warships. Within 3 months, the first Velthraki survey fleets appeared at the edges of human space. They were not subtle about it. Enormous ships with sharp angular hulls drifted past human border stations, their weapon systems active, their communication channels silent. They scanned human colonies from orbit. They buzzed civilian transport ships close enough to trigger collision alarms. And when human patrol vessels approached them, they simply ignored all hails and moved on. Then the abductions started. Colonists on the border world of Harlan's Rest reported strange lights in the night sky. Within a week, 17 people had vanished from outlying settlements. The Velthraki were taking humans, studying them, cataloging them the way a scientist might catalog a new insect species found under a rock. The United Terran Navy dispatched a formal complaint through every diplomatic channel available. The Conclave received the complaint, filed it, and did nothing. The Velthraki were too powerful, too wealthy, too important to the galactic economy. Humanity was too small, too young, too irrelevant to matter. But there was one person in the Conclave who understood what was happening, and she was terrified. Archivist Talon was a Kelvari, a small species with soft blue skin and enormous dark eyes that always looked slightly wet, as though they were perpetually on the verge of tears. The Kelvari were scholars, historians, record-keepers. They did not fight, they did not conquer, they simply watched and remembered. And Talon had spent the last 30 years of her life studying one subject that no other alien scholar found interesting. She studied Earth. She had read every human text she could find. She had watched their history unfold like a horror story written by a madman. She knew about their ice ages and their plagues, their wars and their famines. She knew that their homeworld had a gravity 3 times the galactic average, an atmosphere laced with a corrosive gas they casually called oxygen, and weather patterns that included hurricanes, tornadoes, and literal walls of fire. She knew that the dominant survival strategy of early humans was something called persistence hunting. They would chase an animal across open ground for hours, sometimes days, never fast, never stopping, until the prey simply collapsed from exhaustion and died. She knew what a Deathworld species was, and she knew that everyone around her had forgotten. Talon requested a private session with the Conclave's senior council. It took her weeks to get one. When she finally stood before them, a tiny blue figure barely 4 feet tall, surrounded by towering alien dignitaries, she spoke with a voice that trembled but did not break. "You are making a terrible mistake," she said. "The Velthraki are provoking a species you do not understand. You look at humans and you see a small, young civilization with a handful of colonies and an unremarkable military. You see weakness. But I have studied their world, and I have studied their history, and I am telling you now, what you see as weakness is something far more dangerous." She paused. The council stared at her with polite disinterest. "Their planet tried to kill them," she continued. "Every single day, for millions of years, their world threw everything it had at them. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, ice ages, extinction events, and they survived all of it. They did not just survive. They conquered their planet. They reached its highest mountains, its deepest oceans, its frozen poles. They split the atom. They left their world and walked on their own moon. And they did all of this while constantly fighting each other." She took a shaky breath. "You are poking a species that was forged in a furnace," she said. "And if you do not stop the Velthraki from pushing them, you will see what happens when Deathworlders stop being patient." The senior council thanked her for her input, and they did absolutely nothing. 3 weeks later, Velthraki warships entered the orbit of New Madras, a human colony of 2,300,000 souls, and declared the system annexed under ancient Dominion star charts that no one had ever seen before. The blockade began at dawn, and somewhere in the deep black of space, aboard the bridge of the Terran dreadnought Unconquered, Admiral Idris Okonkwo received the news. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with dark skin and close-cropped gray hair, and eyes that had seen more than they should have. He read the report twice, he set it down, and he looked out at the stars with the quiet, terrible calm of a man who had hoped, truly hoped, that it would not come to this. He picked up the comm and spoke 2 words to his fleet. "Move out." The stars did not tremble, the void did not shudder, but something had shifted in the darkness all the same. Something ancient and patient and very, very dangerous had just opened its eyes. The blockade around New Madras was a wall of metal and silence. 47 Velthraki warships hung in orbit above the colony, like dark thorns against the pale blue of the planet below. Their weapons were powered, their shields were active, and their communication channels broadcast only one message on repeat. This system is now sovereign territory of the Velthraki Dominion. All human vessels will surrender or be destroyed. 2,300,000 people looked up at the sky and saw the shadows of alien warships crossing their sun. They did not panic. They were human. They had been through worse. Their ancestors had survived ice ages and world wars, plagues that killed half a continent, and bombs that turned cities to ash. A blockade was just another Tuesday with worse weather. But fear was there, quiet and cold, sitting in the chest of every parent who held their child a little closer that night. Admiral Idris Okonkwo brought the Terran Third Fleet to the edge of the New Madras system within 6 days. It was not a small force. 28 warships, including the dreadnought Unconquered, 4 heavy cruisers, and a swarm of fast attack frigates that moved through space like wolves circling a campfire. But it was smaller than the Velthraki Armada, and every tactical officer in the fleet knew it. Okonkwo did not care about numbers. He had never cared about numbers. He cared about timing, positioning, and the willingness to follow through on a promise. He opened a channel, not encrypted, not private, but broadcast on every open frequency so that the entire sector could hear. And he delivered the first warning. This is Admiral Idris Okonkwo of the United Terran Navy. You have entered sovereign human space and blockaded a civilian world containing 2,300,000 non-combatants. You have 72 standard hours to withdraw all military assets beyond the recognized border. This is not a request, it is not a negotiation, and it is not a bluff. You have been warned. The message traveled at the speed of light in every direction. It reached Velthraki command ships, conclave listening posts, merchant vessels, and pirate hideouts alike. Everyone heard it, and almost everyone dismissed it. Aboard his flagship, the Dominion's Fang, shipmaster Zorath Velkayan listened to the humans' warning with something between amusement and contempt. His compound eyes flickered as his officers translated the message, and he made a sound that the Velthraki used for laughter, a dry clicking of mandibles that sounded like bones snapping. They threaten us, he said to his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Krelvash. 28 ships threaten 47. Do they not understand mathematics? Krelvash tilted her head. The Deathworlders are known for irrational behavior, shipmaster. Perhaps they genuinely believe they can fight us. Then they are as stupid as they are small, Zorath replied. He dismissed the warning with a wave of his claw and ordered the blockade to hold. 72 hours passed. The humans did not fire. The Velthraki did not move, and the people of New Madras waited in the terrible space between war and peace, where every minute stretched like a rubber band about to snap. When the deadline expired, Okonkwo sent the second warning. This time, there was no voice. Instead, every Velthraki ship in the system received a data packet, a single file, transmitted simultaneously to all 47 vessels. When the Velthraki officers opened it, they found a complete tactical map of their own fleet. Every ship was identified by name, class, armament, shield frequency, and crew complement. The map also showed the locations of 12 additional Velthraki vessels that were supposed to be hidden in the asteroid belt under stealth fields, ships that the Dominion believed were completely invisible. Accompanying the map was a short text message. You have been seen, you have been counted, you have been measured. Withdraw now. For the first time, Zorath felt something shift in his certainty. The humans had found the hidden reserve fleet. That should not have been possible. Velthraki's stealth technology was the best in the galaxy, and these soft little Deathworlders from the galactic backwater had cut through it like it was not even there. But Zorath was old and proud and had never retreated from anything in his life. Retreat was not a concept his culture respected. The Velthraki word for retreat was the same as their word for shame. So he made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. He sent a raiding force, 3 fast cruisers and a carrier full of ground troops, to the human colony of Ericsson's Landing, a small agricultural world 4 systems away from New Madras. The colony had no military garrison. It had 12,000 people, most of them farmers and their families. Zorath wanted to send a message of his own, a message written in blood that would teach these Deathworlders what it meant to challenge the Dominion. The Velthraki raiders arrived at Ericsson's Landing at dawn, local time. They did not announce themselves. They did not issue warnings. They simply opened fire. The orbital bombardment lasted 45 minutes. Entire farming communities were reduced to black craters. Grain silos burned like torches against the morning sky. Families who had been eating breakfast were turned to ash before they could reach their shelters. And when the ground troops descended, they killed everyone they found. Men, women, children, the elderly, the sick. They killed them all, methodically, and without hesitation, because the Velthraki did not see humans as people. They saw them as pests, as vermin from a toxic world, as things to be exterminated. 12,416 human beings died that morning. The news reached Earth 7 hours later. The reaction was not what the Velthraki expected. They had expected terror. They had expected the humans to recoil, to beg, to seek peace at any price. That was what every other species in galactic history had done when the Dominion demonstrated its willingness to destroy civilian populations. Instead, something else happened. The people of Earth went quiet. Not the quiet of fear, but the quiet of a storm gathering its strength. The kind of quiet that comes before lightning splits the sky in half. The Terran Parliament convened an emergency session. It was the shortest parliamentary debate in human history. The vote was called within 90 minutes, and the result was unanimous. Every single representative, from every nation, every colony, every station and outpost that humanity called home, voted the same way. Condition Omega, total and unrestricted war authorization against the Velthraki Dominion. The military machine that humanity had spent 2 centuries quietly building in the shadows of the galactic backwater began to move. Shipyards that had been running at 10% capacity roared to full production. Reserve fleets that had been mothballed in deep space anchorages powered up their engines for the first time in decades. And across 14 colony worlds, men and women kissed their families goodbye and reported for duty. And then Ambassador Lena Vasquez stood before a microphone on the conclave station and delivered the final warning. She did not shout. She did not rage. She did not weep. Her voice was low and clear and carried the weight of 12,000 dead. To the Velthraki Dominion and to all species who bear witness, you were warned. We came to you with words, and you answered with silence. We showed you that we could see you, and you answered with murder. 12,000 of our people are dead. Farmers, teachers, children, dead. Because you believed we were too small to matter. She paused, and the silence in the conclave chamber was absolute. So hear me now, and hear me well, because I will say this only once. What comes next is not anger. It is a promise. We will come for our people on New Madras. We will find every soul you took from Harlan's Rest. And we will ensure that you never threaten a human life again. There will be no more warnings. There will be no more words. There will be only consequence. She stepped away from the microphone. The broadcast went dark. Across the galaxy, 4,000 species sat in stunned silence. Some of them understood what they had just heard. Most of them did not. But a few, the Kelvari, the old ones, the ones who had seen empires rise and fall, they understood perfectly. Archivist Taylun sat in her small quarters on the conclave station, watching the broadcast recording for the 3rd time. Her blue hands were shaking. She picked up her personal communicator and sent one final message to the Velthraki diplomatic channel. A message she knew they would ignore. just like they had ignored everything else. "You do not know what you have awakened," she wrote. "I have studied them. I know what lives inside them. They carry the memory of every extinction event, every ice age, every predator that hunted them in the dark. And they carry something else too, a fury that is older than your empire, older than your gods, older than the stars you claim as your own. You had every chance to walk away. You chose this, and now the Deathworlders are coming." Zorath read the message. He deleted it, and he ordered his fleet to prepare for battle. He was not afraid. He had fought 100 wars against 100 species, and he had won them all. Humans were soft, fragile, short-lived creatures from a backwater world. They bled easily, they broke easily, and they died easily. That was what he believed. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The United Terran Navy called it Operation Falling Sky, and it began, not with a roar, but with a whisper. At 0300 hours, Terran Standard Time, every light on every human warship in the sector went dark. Communication channels fell silent, engine signatures dropped to 0, and for 17 minutes, the Velthraki sensors showed nothing but empty space where an entire fleet had been just moments before. Then the humans reappeared, not where they had been, but everywhere at once. Admiral Okonkwo had spent those 17 minutes repositioning his entire fleet, using a maneuver that Terran naval academies called the Ghost Step, a coordinated micro-jump that moved dozens of ships simultaneously through short-range hyperspace corridors so brief that most species considered them too dangerous to attempt. The margin of error was measured in meters, and a single miscalculation would cause 2 ships to materialize inside each other. No sane species would risk it. Humans were not sane by galactic standards. They were Deathworlders. And Deathworlders had a very different relationship with risk. The Velthraki blockade fleet around New Madras woke up to find Terran warships inside their formation, not approaching from a distance where they could be tracked and intercepted, but already there, already in weapons range, already locked on. The Battle of New Madras lasted 5 hours and 42 minutes, and it changed everything the galaxy believed about humanity. The first thing the Velthraki noticed was the ships themselves. They had seen Terran vessels before, blocky, ugly things with none of the elegant curves that characterized Velthraki engineering. The Dominion built warships like works of art, sleek and efficient, designed to be fast and deadly. Human ships looked like someone had welded armor plating onto a brick and then welded more armor plating on top of that. There was a reason for this. Humans did not build ships to win quickly. They built ships to survive. Every Terran warship had triple redundant power systems, backup life support, secondary and tertiary bridge stations, and hull plating so thick that the Velthraki weapons officers stared at their damage readouts in confusion, unable to understand why their shots were barely scratching the surface. The Velthraki flagship Dominion's Fang fired a full broadside into the heavy cruiser TNS Iron Will. The shots hit perfectly. They should have gutted the ship. Instead, the Iron Will shuddered, vented atmosphere from a dozen breaches, and then turned directly into the Dominion's Fang and returned fire with everything it had. That was the second thing the Velthraki learned about humans. They did not retreat when wounded. They attacked harder. Shipmaster Zorath watched from his command throne as the battle unfolded, and for the first time in his long career, the tactical display did not make sense to him. The humans were outnumbered. They were outgunned on paper, and yet they were winning, not through superior technology, not through brilliant strategy, but through something the Velthraki had no word for. They simply refused to stop. A Terran frigate took a direct hit to its engine section and lost main propulsion. Instead of going dead in space, the crew rerouted power through emergency conduits, fired up chemical backup thrusters that no other species even bothered to install, and limped forward to ram its nose into the side of a Velthraki cruiser. Then, the Marines aboard poured through the breach and began fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors. This was the third lesson, and it was the one that broke the Velthraki spirit: the boarding actions. Human Marines breached Velthraki ships in sealed combat suits, cutting through hull plating with thermal lances and dragging themselves through smoking, shattered corridors filled with toxic fumes, shattered metal, and venting atmosphere. The conditions inside a breached warship were lethal by any reasonable standard. Low oxygen, extreme heat, clouds of metallic dust that shredded unprotected lungs. The humans did not care. They had evolved on a world where the air itself was a corrosive oxidizer. They had lungs that could filter smoke and particulates that would suffocate other species in minutes. They had bones dense enough to absorb impacts that would shatter Velthraki exoskeletons. And they had a cardiovascular system so robust that they could fight at full intensity for hours in conditions that would leave most galactic species unconscious in seconds. But it was the adrenaline that truly terrified the Velthraki. When a human was injured, when a human was frightened, when a human was pushed to the edge of death, something happened inside their bodies. Their adrenal glands flooded their bloodstream with chemicals that made them faster, stronger, and nearly immune to pain. What other species experienced as a brief panic response, humans had refined into a combat enhancement that evolution had been perfecting for 2 million years. Velthraki soldiers reported fighting humans who had been shot, burned, and broken, humans who should have been dead or dying, and those humans kept fighting. They kept coming. They dragged themselves forward on shattered legs and swung weapons with arms that should not have been able to move. One Velthraki officer recorded a human Marine who took a blade through the shoulder, looked down at it, pulled it out, and used the enemy's own weapon to keep fighting. Zorath received these reports and felt the cold hand of something his species barely understood close around his hearts. The Velthraki did not have a strong concept of fear. Their evolution had not required it. They were apex predators on their homeworld, armored and bladed and born to kill. Nothing on their planet had ever given them a reason to be afraid. But humans were something they had never encountered before. A species that had been hunted, that had been prey, that had learned to survive not through armor or venom or speed, but through sheer, bloody, unrelenting endurance. They were persistence predators, a concept so alien to the Velthraki that their tactical analysts had to explain it 3 times before Zorath understood. They do not need to be faster than their prey, the analyst told him, her voice unsteady. They simply follow it. They walk, they jog, they track, and the prey runs and rests and runs again, and the humans keep coming. They do not stop. They do not tire. They follow until the prey collapses from exhaustion. That is what they are doing to us, Shipmaster. They are not trying to win a single battle. They are trying to run us until we cannot run anymore. The blockade at New Madras shattered in under 6 hours. The Velthraki fleet broke and retreated, leaving behind 11 destroyed warships and 9 more too damaged to make the jump to hyperspace. The humans captured those 9 vessels, and, to the absolute bewilderment of the surviving Velthraki crews, treated the prisoners with medical care and gave them food. This confused the galaxy almost as much as the battle itself. But Okonkwo was not finished. Condition Omega was not a defensive mandate, it was a total war authorization. And Admiral Okonkwo was a student of human military history. He knew that the only way to end a war with a species that respected nothing but strength was to take the war to their doorstep. The UTN pushed forward. They did not stop at the border of human space. They crossed into Velthraki territory with a speed and coordination that stunned the Conclave's military observers. System after system fell, not because the humans destroyed everything in their path, but because they were terrifyingly precise. They targeted shipyards, military installations, communication relays, and command networks. They crippled the Velthraki war machine with surgical strikes while leaving civilian infrastructure intact. It was not rage. It was not revenge. It was something worse. It was professionalism. The galaxy watched through long-range sensors and intercepted communications, and what they saw made them reconsider everything they thought they knew about the small, quiet species from the backwater of the Orion Spur. The Quelvari historians began updating their records. The conclave diplomats began rewriting their assessments, and species that had spent centuries ignoring humanity suddenly found themselves looking at star maps and counting the distance between their own worlds and the nearest human fleet. Archivist Talon sat alone in her study, watching battlefield footage on a loop, and she whispered to herself, I told you all. You cannot forge a species in a Deathworld furnace and expect them to be gentle when you threaten what they love. And somewhere deep in Velthraki space, Shipmaster Zorath stared at the tactical display that showed human fleets advancing toward his homeworlds. And he finally understood the one thing that every Deathworld species knows in its bones, the one truth that evolution had burned into humanity's very DNA, across 2 million years of blood and ice and fire. When you corner something that has survived everything its world could throw at it, when you threaten the people it loves, it does not surrender, it does not negotiate, and it does not stop. It becomes the thing that the darkness itself is afraid of. The conclave chamber had not been this full in 300 years. Every delegation seat was occupied, every gallery was packed, and the air recyclers were working at maximum capacity to handle the biological output of 4,000 species all breathing, sweating, and trembling in the same room at the same time. They were watching the war. Massive holographic displays floated above the chamber floor, showing real-time sensor data from the front lines. The images were grainy and incomplete. The humans had jammed most surveillance frequencies near the combat zones. But what came through was enough to send shockwaves through civilizations that had believed they understood the order of the galaxy. The Velthraki Dominion, an empire of 800 systems, a military power that had not lost a war in 4,000 years, was being dismantled by a species that most of the conclave could not even find on a star map 6 months ago. Delegate after delegate rose to speak, and for the first time in living memory, no one interrupted anyone else. The chamber was gripped by something between fascination and raw terror. The Morvathi ambassador, a tall, thin being from a low-gravity garden world, where the most dangerous animal was a slow-moving herbivore the size of a house cat, stood at her podium, with her 4 delicate hands clasped together. Her skin had gone pale, which in her species was a sign of extreme distress. How, she asked, and her voice carried through the silent chamber. How can they sustain this? Their fleet is smaller. Their technology is not superior. Their species is only 2 centuries into spacefaring. How are they winning? No one answered for a long moment. Then a deep rumbling voice came from the far side of the chamber. The Grothaki delegate, a massive stone-skinned being from a heavy-gravity world. The Grothaki were one of the few species that came close to matching human physical resilience, and even they were shaken by what they were seeing. Because they are not fighting the way we fight, the Grothaki said. We fight to win. They fight to not lose. There is a difference. When we take damage, we calculate odds and withdraw if the numbers are unfavorable. When they take damage, they get angry and close the distance. They do not see injury as a reason to stop. They see it as a reason to hit harder. The Morvathi ambassador shuddered. That is insane. No, the Grothaki replied. That is what a death world does to a species. It teaches them that retreat means death. Every instinct they have, every fiber of their biology, screams at them to keep moving forward no matter what. They cannot help it. It is what they are. The chamber erupted in overlapping conversations. Translators struggled to keep up, as 4,000 species tried to process information that fundamentally challenged their understanding of what was possible. It was into this chaos that Archivist Talon walked. She was still small, she was still blue, she still looked like she might cry at any moment. But when she reached the central podium and activated the speaker system, her voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. "I requested this session 4 months ago," she began. "I was denied. I requested it again 3 months ago. I was told that human affairs were not a priority. I requested it again 2 months ago, after the massacre at Ericsson's Landing, and I was told that the situation was under review." She looked around the chamber with those enormous dark eyes. "The situation is no longer under review. The situation is a war, and the galaxy is terrified, and you are all sitting here asking how this happened. I am here to tell you." She activated her own holographic display, and an image appeared above the chamber. A blue-green world, wrapped in white clouds, orbiting a yellow star. "This is Earth," she said. "Classification, Category 12 Deathworld. Most of you know what that means in theory, but none of you understand what it means in practice. Let me explain." The image shifted to show geological data, climate patterns, and biological surveys. Earth's gravity is 3 times the galactic average for inhabited worlds. This means that every human being carries a skeletal and muscular system that is absurdly over-engineered for any normal environment. In standard galactic gravity, humans are faster, stronger, and more physically capable than almost any species in the conclave. They do not notice this advantage because to them, it is simply normal. The image changed again, showing atmospheric composition. Their atmosphere is 21% oxygen, a corrosive, highly reactive gas that most species would consider a toxic industrial chemical. Humans breathe it. They need it. Their entire metabolism is built around burning oxygen at a rate that gives them extraordinary energy output and endurance. A human can sustain physical activity for hours, in some cases days, at levels that would kill most of us within minutes. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Talon pressed on. Their homeworld has no stable climate. It cycles between ice ages and warming periods. It produces storms that can level cities, earthquakes that reshape continents, and volcanic eruptions that darken the sky for years. The species that survive on such a world are not gentle. They are not fragile. They are built to endure catastrophe after catastrophe and keep going. She paused and let the silence build. But here is what you truly need to understand. It is not their strength that makes them dangerous. It is not their endurance. It is not even their terrifying biology. It is something else entirely. She brought up a new image. This one showed footage from the front lines, specifically from a Velthraki colony world that the UTN had captured 3 days earlier. The footage showed human soldiers setting up field hospitals, not for their own wounded, but for Velthraki civilians. Human medics were treating alien injuries with hands that were steady and gentle. The same hands that had been firing weapons hours before. "They are kind," Talon said, and her voice cracked. "After everything their world did to them, after everything the universe has thrown at them, they are still kind. They fight like nothing the galaxy has ever seen, and then they stop fighting and they help. They build refugee corridors for enemy civilians. They treat prisoners of war with dignity and medical care. They weep over their enemies' dead." She looked around the chamber. "This is what the Velthraki failed to understand. This is what all of you failed to understand. You looked at their kindness and saw weakness. You looked at their patience and saw submission. You looked at their willingness to talk before fighting and thought they were afraid. But their kindness is not weakness. A deliberate, conscious choice made by a species that knows exactly how much destruction it is capable of, and chooses, every single day, to be gentle instead." She took a breath. The Velthraki took that choice away from them. They killed 12,000 civilians and forced humanity to stop being gentle. And now, you see what was always underneath, what was always there, held back by nothing but their own will. The chamber was silent, absolutely, completely silent. When Talon stepped down from the podium, no one spoke for nearly 10 minutes. The diplomatic fallout was immediate and enormous. Within days, dozens of species began reaching out to humanity through back channels. Trade offers, non-aggression pacts, and alliance proposals flooded into Terran diplomatic networks. The Rilvar Collective, a peaceful federation of 12 worlds, sent a message that simply read, "We would very much like to be your friends, and we hope that you will accept this as the sincere and slightly nervous gesture that it is." The Grothaki, who respected strength above all things, sent a barrel of their finest fermented mineral water, and a formal request for joint military exercises. The Kelvari sent scholars. The Morvathi sent flowers. But not everyone was ready to embrace the new reality. Deep in Velthraki space, the war ground on, and Shipmaster Zorath was not finished. He had fallen back to the Dominion's core systems, pulling his remaining fleets into a defensive formation around the Velthraki homeworlds. The losses had been catastrophic. Nearly 2/3 of his fleet was destroyed, captured, or too damaged to fight. But Zorath still had one card left to play. Hidden in a weapons vault, beneath the surface of the Dominion's primary military moon, was something that the Velthraki had built long ago, and hoped they would never need. A quantum destabilizer. It was not a weapon of war. It was a weapon of extinction. When fired at a planet, it would penetrate the crust, reach the core, and trigger a cascading quantum collapse that would crack the world apart from the inside. It was banned by every treaty in galactic history. It was a weapon that existed for one purpose only: to destroy a world so completely that nothing would ever live there again. Zorath looked at the tactical display showing human fleets approaching his homeworlds, and he made the coldest decision of his life. If the Dominion was going to fall, then he would make sure the Deathworlders paid a price they would never forget. He gave the order to aim the destabilizer at the human colony of Harvest, a green and beautiful world of 9 million souls, families, and farmers, and children, who had done nothing except exist in a galaxy that had decided they were not allowed to. The weapon powered up in silence, targeting data was loaded, and somewhere in the cold math of Zorath's mind, 9 million lives became an acceptable cost for his empire's wounded pride. He pressed the command authorization, and the weapon launched into the dark. The quantum destabilizer moved through space at near light speed, a sliver of metal no larger than a shuttle, carrying inside it enough destructive potential to crack a world in half. It had no soul, no conscience, no capacity for mercy. It was simply a machine, following its programming, aimed at a planet called Harvest, where 9 million human beings were living their lives without any idea that death was racing toward them through the dark. Admiral Okonkwo received the alert 12 minutes after the weapon launched. A long-range sensor station on the edge of the Velthraki core systems had detected the energy signature, a signature that matched theoretical models for planet-killing weapons that the Conclave had banned centuries ago. He read the trajectory data. He checked it twice, and then the blood drained from his face. Harvest. They had aimed it at Harvest. Okonkwo was a calm man. He had built his entire career on being the steadiest person in any room. But, for 3 seconds, he stood at his command console and felt something crack open inside his chest. A grief so deep it had no bottom, and a fury so hot it had no color. Then the 3 seconds passed, and he became the Admiral again. He pulled up the intercept calculations. His tactical officers had already run the numbers, and the answer was written on their faces before anyone spoke. The fleet was too far away. The weapon was too fast. No Terran warship in the main battle group could reach the destabilizer's trajectory in time to intercept it. No warship except one. The heavy cruiser TNS Resolve was currently operating independently, running a patrol sweep along the flank of the Velthraki core systems. She was a big ship, old and scarred from weeks of continuous combat, with armor plating that was dented and burned, and beautiful in the way that only things that have survived terrible punishment. Her captain was a woman named Commander Priya Anand, 41 years old, born on Earth in a city called Mumbai, and she had a 6-year-old daughter back on Mars who she had not seen in 4 months. When the Resolve received the intercept order, Commander Anand looked at the navigation data and understood immediately what was being asked. The only way to stop the destabilizer was to place the Resolve directly in its path. The weapon would strike the cruiser instead of the planet. The resulting detonation would destroy both the weapon and the ship. There was no ejection window, there was no escape pod option. The quantum collapse would vaporize everything within 1,000 kilometers, in less than a second. Okonkwo opened a private channel to the Resolve. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. Commander Anand, I need to tell you what I am asking. I know what you are asking, Admiral. Her voice was quiet and clear, the voice of someone who had already made her decision before the words were spoken. You have 1,200 crew aboard. I know. I cannot order this. This is not an order. I need you to understand that. What I am asking is something that no one has the right to demand of another human being. There was a pause. Anand looked at her bridge crew. They looked back at her. And in that silence, something passed between them that no alien species in the galaxy would have understood. A communication older than language, older than civilization, older even than the species itself. It was the look that humans had shared across campfires and battlefields and hospital rooms for 2 million years. The look that said, I am here, and I am not leaving, and we face this together. Anand activated the ship-wide intercom. All hands, this is the commander. I am going to tell you the truth, because you deserve the truth. There is a planet-killing weapon heading for harvest. 9 million people, including families like ours, children like ours. The only way to stop it is to put this ship in its path. I will not pretend this is anything other than what it is. If we do this, we die. All of us, every single one. She paused. She opened the channel to Okonkwo. Admiral, the crew of the Resolve is unanimous. Give us the intercept coordinates. We are going. Okonkwo lowered his head. He pressed his palm flat against the console, and his officer saw his shoulders shake once, just once, before he straightened and transmitted the course data. Commander Anand, there are no words sufficient for what you and your crew are choosing to do. The Navy will remember. Humanity will remember. The galaxy will remember. It has been my honor. The honor is ours, Admiral. Resolve out. The cruiser turned. Her engines flared to maximum burn, pushing the ship to speeds that strained her battered hull. The crew did not panic. They did not scream. Some of them wrote messages to their families on personal data pads. Some of them simply sat at their stations and did their jobs, because that was what humans did. Even at the end, especially at the end, they did their jobs. The Resolve reached the intercept point with 47 seconds to spare. Commander Anand watched the destabilizer appear on her forward display, a bright point of light growing larger with terrible speed. She thought of her daughter. She thought of Mumbai. She thought of the 9 million people on Harvest who would wake up tomorrow because of what happened in the next 3 seconds. For Harvest, she said. The quantum destabilizer struck the TNS Resolve amidships. The detonation was visible from 3 star systems. A flash of white light bloomed in the darkness of space, brief and blinding and silent, and when it faded, there was nothing left. No ship, no weapon, no debris. Just empty space and starlight, and the ghost of 1,200 people who had run toward the fire so that others would not burn. The galaxy received the news within hours, and for the second time in this war, the galaxy went silent. But this silence was different from the first. The first silence had been shock. This silence was something deeper, something that touched the oldest, most fundamental part of every sentient mind that received the transmission. Species that had no concept of self-sacrifice struggled to process what they had witnessed. Species that communicated through mathematics tried to find an equation that could explain why 1,200 individuals would choose certain death for 9 million strangers. Species that had evolved without empathy sat in their chambers and felt, for the first time in their existence, something they could not name. The Velthraki felt it too. When the news reached Zorath's command ship, a change moved through the Dominion fleet like a wave. Officers who had followed Zorath without question for decades looked at each other and saw their own doubt reflected back. The weapon had been meant to break the humans, to prove that they could be hurt so badly that they would stop. Instead, it had proven the opposite, that humans would die before they let their people be destroyed. Zorath's second-in-command, Krelvash, stood at the shipmaster's side and spoke words that no Velthraki officer had ever spoken to a commanding officer in the history of the Dominion. "It is over, shipmaster. We cannot defeat a species that does this. We cannot break them. They will sacrifice themselves down to the last soul, and they will still find a way to win. This war is lost." Zorath said nothing. He stared at the tactical display. The human fleets were closing in from every direction. His remaining ships were battered and demoralized and crewed by soldiers who had just watched their greatest weapon be swallowed by a single enemy cruiser, and the mad, magnificent courage of its crew. Okonkwo opened one final channel. His voice carried across the void, steady and raw with grief. "Shipmaster Zorath, your weapon has failed. Your fleet is broken. Your people suffer for your pride. I have lost 1,200 souls today who were better than either of us. Surrender now, and I swear on their names, your people will be treated with honor. This is not a warning. It is a mercy I choose to offer. You will not hear it again." Zorath reached for the communication controls to reject the offer, and felt the cold edge of a blade against his throat. His own officers had drawn weapons. Krelvash stood behind him, her eyes hard. "You led us into a war with Deathworlders," she said. "You killed 12,000 of their civilians, and turned a quiet species into a force that ate our empire alive. You fired a planet killer, and they stopped it with their own bodies. It is over, Zorath. Accept it, or I will accept it for you." The Velthraki fleet surrendered 17 minutes later. The war was over. The aftermath unfolded slowly, the way all great changes do. The Velthraki Dominion was dismantled as a military power, but humanity did not destroy them. The Conclave expected annihilation, the complete erasure of the Velthraki as a civilization, because that was what every other victorious species in galactic history had done. Instead, the humans sent reconstruction teams. They rebuilt infrastructure they had destroyed. They provided food and medical supplies to Velthraki worlds. They treated captured soldiers as prisoners with rights and dignity, and returned them to their families when the peace was signed. The galaxy could not understand it. It made no sense. How could a species that fought with such terrible fury turn around and offer kindness to the people who had massacred their civilians? But Archivist Taylun understood. She published her study 6 months after the war's end. A document titled Deathworlders, a revised understanding, and it became the most widely read text in galactic history. In it, she wrote one passage that was quoted in every language across 4,000 worlds. "They are not kind despite being dangerous. They are kind because they are dangerous. They know what they are capable of. They have seen their own capacity for destruction, and they choose every single day to be something better. Not their strength, not their endurance, not their terrifying biology, but the fact that they possess the power to burn the galaxy to ash and instead they build hospitals on the worlds of their enemies. The Conclave elevated humanity to Tier 1 Council member status, not for their military power, though that alone would have justified it, but for the crew of the TNS Resolve. The vote was unanimous, and the chamber wept during the announcement. A memorial was built at the coordinates where the Resolve had detonated. Every species in the Conclave contributed something. Stone from Kelvari homeworld, crystal from the Morvathi Gardens, even a shard of armor from a Velthraki warship, offered by Krelvash herself as a gesture of respect that her species had never extended to anyone before. The plaque was inscribed in 4,000 languages. The words were the same in every one. They ran toward the fire. 1 year after the war, Admiral Idris Okonkwo traveled alone to the memorial. His shuttle drifted in the silence of open space, surrounded by nothing but stars and the faint glow of the monument. He read the names, all 1,200, and he was quiet for a very long time. The stars did not speak. The void offered no comfort. But the names were there, etched in metal that would outlast empires, and that was enough. "You gave them a reason to never test us again," he whispered. "Rest now. You earned it." He saluted the stars. He turned his shuttle toward home, and behind him, the memorial hung in the darkness, a small bright thing in an endless void, built by a galaxy that had finally learned what it meant to share the stars with Deathworlders. Not conquerors, not monsters, not weapons, just humans. Stubborn, fragile, furious, gentle, impossible humans, who carried the fire of their savage world in their hearts, and used it to light the way for everyone else.